I think many of the guests are familiar with the term world citizens. However, education in an era of uncertainty is a kind of rare topic. As we have been living in a century of rapid developments, uncertainty has become a lifestyle. On the other hand, COVID-19 pandemic brought a new level to uncertainty that we cannot make plans longer than 1 week. Before giving the microphone to our guests, I would like to give you some information about today's host, Ankara Education Platform, which was founded 3 years ago by 22 prominent private schools. The main principles of the platform are: all the member schools were founded by educators and run by educators. Member schools invest their earnings for the welfare of their students, and all the members facilitate only in education sector. We do not invest in branding or advertisement, but we invest in our teachers. Without any political or commercial stake, we are dutifully faithful to Turkish Republic's laws, values, and principles. We also consider and apply education as a universal science. Our member schools are aware that our policies and implementations shall be transparent and accountable. Today, we have two guests that I'm delighted to announce. Today's keynote speaker is Professor Fernando Riemers, who is the fourth foundation professor of the practice of international education at Harvard University. He is also the director of the Global Education Innovation Initiative at Harvard University. He is an expert in the field of global education. His research and teaching focus on understanding how to educate children and youth so they can thrive in the 21st century. He is a member of UNESCO's high-level commission on the futures of education. He has written or edited 33 books, and one of them will be in Turkish very soon. His book, Education Students to Improve the World, will be sent to your emails in a short time with a special forward for Turkish teachers. Professor Riemers acted in several important administrative positions, and he also received many international awards. In my opinion, he's going to be selected as the most productive academician of the pandemic in a short time. It's really impossible to follow all the events he has participated. Professor Riemers, would you like to greet the audience?
Thank you so much, Mirkan, for the opportunity. It's a real privilege to be with all of you today.
Thank you very much. And let me introduce you, Dr. Adnan Boyacı. Our guest of honor, Dr. Adnan Boyacı, is the General Manager of Teacher Development and Education Department of Turkish Education Ministry. He is also having important responsibilities at UNESCO's Sustainability Committee and Turkish National Education Commission. Before his current position, he worked as an academician at prominent Turkish universities and also at the University of Cologne and University of Oslo. He also published many academic articles nationwide and internationally. Right now, he is striving for improving Turkish teachers' skills. Personally, I attended many of his inspiring seminars and benefited a lot in terms of teacher training. Mr. General Manager, microphone is yours, and thank you for the introduction speech.
Okay. First of all, welcome to all of my colleagues and the single guest, Dr. Riemers. I'm honored to be participating at such kind of activity in a webinar, and we really appreciate another education platform for providing such a kind of free participated webinar. And this such kind of webinars has been so much critical, especially the pandemic period, for dissemination and sharing of every kind of knowledge and information, creating and free platforms, exchanging every kind of ideas. And it's so, this is one of the actually outstanding, the conferences, webinar for the teachers, not only in Turkey, for all of the teachers in the world. And I just critically mentioned about what's the global citizenship and its connection with the Turkey's such current role, and what are the major skills that or the efforts that that's provided to teachers And I briefly mentioned about the 2023 vision statement and then the policy paper and its meaning. And under this, the policy paper, what we have done so far for teachers and what's the next, what we haven't done and what we haven't managed and what are we critical plan to do for teachers. I'll do some topics that will share with you. Actually, the global citizenship as a concept is the idea of identity, one of the identity, transcend the geography of the political borders without losing its nationality and ethics or the own identity. We can shortly talk about the humanity, focusing on the humanity. On the on one side, we are talking about, when they are talking about the global citizenship, we are talking about humanity. On the other side, enforcing, empowering the skills of the students, children, or the human with the international skills and international competencies. And it's so flexibility, creativity, proactivity, dedication, critical thinking, and problem solving are the, some of the critical key concepts that's underlined for the global citizenship. And within this perspective, in Turkey, in 2018, Minister of National Education has declared the 2023 Educational Vision Policy Paper. And this is something critical because it's the unique paper published by the government or the ministry, Minister of National Education, which promises the teacher what will be due for the teachers, focusing on the common social contract in society and among the educators and the teachers. And 2023 vision statement beyond a policy paper, actually what the aims, what the goals, what the actions, action plans, it's a strategic plan promising the improving the education with the teachers. And at the center of the actually the 2023 vision statement, main focus is the teachers and the teacher training, not only for in-service training, but also pre-service teacher training. And within this perspective, at the beginning of the 2019, we initiated all of the action plans. And the motto of the vision statement is equity and inclusive education, which is shaped the same motto with the UNICEF and the UNESCO. Why is it important? Because, of course, equality of opportunity, participating in education is critical, but the justice to participate in education, providing an education is much more critical, especially in cases like Turkey. So our goal is not to support the central system, but also the ultimate goal is creating a sustainable system, providing an ecosystem, building up an ecosystem at national scale to enrich diversity of the contents, not only in the ministry, but also in every kind of provinces. So the best way for the fast dissemination is the digitalization and the digital, digital environment. So we have tried to link the digital material with the printed material, and all of those materials have also been the sub-content of teacher training materials. One of the other critical goals is providing and train the teacher leaders who have acquired a culture of using and doing digital content and the culture with necessary 21st century skills. And within this perspective, actually, this is not actually the plan. It's actually the paradigm shift, because instead of in-service training, we underline the continuous professional development (CPD). Why is it important? It's much more tangible to get a much more tangible solution, you have to empower and support all of the teachers in the world, in Turkey. And we have really faced a critical challenge. We have 1 million teachers in Turkey. It's a huge number, especially compared in EU and most of the countries in the world. And it's so, while enriching and empowering of the teachers, we have to create a subsystem among the teachers. We call them professional learning community, PLC. And first of all, we asked the teachers, what do you need? And so they told us that we have actually the skills and certifications, which is certification which are valuable not only in Turkey but also actually the any of the countries of the world. So accredited programs is an accredited certification program will have our another goal, and collaboration with national and international universities, foundations, companies, NGOs, and the trade unions has been the way to build such kind of internationally accredited certifications and providing them to all of the teachers in Turkey. So we invented a new business plan in ministry to support the ecosystem and to get necessary energy and support from the ecosystem. And so instead of short-term workshops, we have tried to build a long-term continuous professional development programs and to set up professional learning communities in every city and creating easily accessible, free charge, and independent from the time and the location, accessible internet digital platforms. And so we revised the EBA. EBA is, is the educational portal provided by Ministry of National Education. So we invented a new learning management system, LMS. Is a digital platform actually delivering every kind of courses and educational platforms with interactive style, and it's founded on an artificial intelligence. And so we revised and we optimized the learning management system for distance education activities. And so at the end, we partially initiated the first step when at the second half of the 20 and in 19. And with this one, accredited and certificated programs we initiate, and the teachers' interest has been very high to accredited certification programs. And we digitally education, we have provided different programs with different subjects. For example, we collaborate with the Google, and the capacity development in information technologies and software seminars were initiated, and digital transformation of our teachers program has been put in a process, and information processing, algorithmic thinking, digital entrepreneurship, and the professional development programs were initiated for teachers. This international accredited programs provided by the Google, and the Google collaboration has created a large-scale teachers what digital specifically tailored digital skills. Approximately 70,000 teachers have got this certification. What the Microsoft we offered the expertise and software engineering in the face-to-face trainings. More than 10,000 teachers get the certification and started to train their own teachers. And now, with the distance education, we have almost trained 200,000 teachers. And collaboration with Palo Alto is another our collaboration with Cisco, Internet of the Things, network managing, Python coding are some of the main seminars and international certification programs that our teachers are really focused on. And then now, at the end of this year, 70,000 teachers will get of the Cisco. And with the Apple, with the TÜBİTAK, we improved different programs. And besides that, we also work with Stanford University and Harvard University and different universities of the Turkey. So we collaborated with the Stanford University and we improved our design thinking professional development program for the teachers for the innovation of the education. And it's those teachers now will be trained at the end of this month. And this is one of the critical skill underlined by the 21st century skills is the designing or innovation. And we collaborated with Harvard University for the teachers of mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology, and also with support the Middlesex Technical University. And all of those programs have been supported and funded by the companies and the NGOs. And they do not only support them financially, but also they took part in actively to improving such kind of programs. With the pandemic and the pandemic period, we have almost completed infrastructure and we tested, we piloted all of those systems. And with this infrastructure and the program, we initiated the digital campaign for teachers, approximately 22 national and internationally certificated programs. And from the 1st of the January to at the end of the May, we offered 800,000 digital certification programs. And at the end of this August, this number will reach 1.2 million teachers. We enlarged the scale and we try to improve the quality of the teacher training. Besides, this is what we haven't done so far. One of our critical goal is to provide the MED programs with collaboration of the universities. But with the pandemic period, the bureaucracy and every kind of activity has slowed. And so at the end of this year, where we will provide MED programs, Master of Education programs without thesis, focusing on the practice in classroom settings. We invented, we will improve MED programs with the different kinds of universities. And also companies such as Apple, Google, Microsoft, or Cisco, or Amazon, all of those companies will also be stakeholder of these programs. We initiated, but we haven't finished. This is one of our things that we haven't finished yet. And secondly, teacher training has two dimensions. One of them is the in-service training. Other one is pre-service education, which means Faculty of Education. We initiated a program with the UNICEF and the Higher Education Council, but it hasn't finished and completed yet. And this is also one of the weakness of our program, that we are the back from the planned time. Did all of those programs, we also, for the pandemic period, we also motivated teachers with different activities. One of them is virtual museums, YouTube channels provided to every kind of short seminars, webinars. And we established and teach a library, which is free library and open to all of the teachers, 1 million teachers, are the some of the actually the platforms, some of the tools that supported those ecosystems. In short, what we have tried to do is to donate and is to share all of the teachers with the global skills. And all of those skills actually are accepted as the central skills. But the much more critical one is we ask them what you need and in which way. For example, caring of the adult education principles or the practice-oriented atelier working, providing a workshop much more focusing on actually much more the practices are the demands of the actual teachers. And so we to realize all of those demands, you need to restructure the model. And so a new business model, new paradigm, a new system, we have tried to construct on Ministry of National Education. And now at the end, we opened the the department of this DG for teacher training in every provinces in Turkey, 81 provinces in Turkey when we open. And then now we provide all of the services. We will carry all of those services to those provinces to support teachers in their own location. In other words, it's a decentralization and distributing every kind of all of those international certification programs, and every kind of support for teachers will be carried to their own premises, to own schools. This is the second step that we will step out, and this will be done at the end of the second half of the 2021. And as a conclusion, we have actually tried to provide the best for our teachers, but we have still a long way to take new steps to complete them. For this webinar, I'm honored to be participating, and it's very actually the good chance to be with our colleagues and to have a conversation with you. We really appreciate I really actually appreciate the Anadolu Education Platform for providing such a kind of critical webinar with Dr. Myers. And in short, thank you all of my colleagues. Thank you for the Mirkan for and every kind of the guys behind this organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Manager. We are really feeling lucky for having such an innovative and enthusiastic leader at this department. And you are doing a great job for training our teachers in a liberal way. And we feel really very happy that you are determining the needs of the teachers, you are asking their opinions, and you are conducting the trainings according to their needs. This is really very special to us. Thank you very much. And you are responsible of 1 million teachers, which is a great number. And thank you for all the things done for our teachers. And right now, microphone is yours, Professor Riemers. We are going to listen to what is world citizenship, and which is much more important, in my opinion, that education in an era of uncertainty will be told by you. We are waiting for your speech enthusiastically. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mirkan. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak with those of you joining us today as you get ready to begin the academic year in Turkey at a time that is very challenging and difficult for all teachers around the world, in fact, for all of humanity. So I especially appreciate this opportunity as an opportunity to remind each and every one of us that we are not alone in the task of trying to do the very best we can to sustain the opportunity to be educated for our students at a time when this could not be more important. So I'm going to speak for about 25 minutes, and then I would love to have a little dialogue with you. Can you now see my screen? Is my screen available? Do you see it, right? Good. So I'm going to talk about what does it mean to educate global citizens in an era of uncertainty. And let me basically say I'm going to be talking about a series of educational resources, which I hope will support all of you in this task of educating global citizens. And I'm so pleased that Mirkan Aydin has arranged to have this book translated into Turkish, and that he will be making this a public good, providing it to all of you very soon. But let me go back to 5 months ago. 5 months ago, when the Secretary General of the World Health Organization announced a pandemic, that began to change our lives in very profound ways. I don't need to remind you, you know what these figures are. 250,000 people have been infected in Turkey. Almost 6,000 people have died. For the world, 21 million people have been infected, and more than 750,000 have died. And this is not over. So this is a global calamity. There is no other way to place it. But the impact of this calamity, which is like a meteorite hitting planet Earth with full force and opening a humongous hole that runs the risk of creating all kinds of complications for us. We can expect the latest issue of the journal Foreign Affairs summarizes, in the words of two colleagues at the Kennedy School of Government, the impact of this pandemic in this way. This is going to create multiple financial crises around the world. It is going to cause many governments to default on their debt. It is going to produce a contraction in economic activity, a decline in global trade, increased unemployment, with a disproportionate impact on lower income households. The World Bank has anticipated that 60 million people will be thrown into poverty just in the next few years, and an increase in hunger. And the recovery will be slow. The United Nations has put this crisis in proper perspective. And this is from a recent report, basically saying this is much more than a health crisis. It is an economic, a humanitarian, a security, and a human rights crisis that has affected individuals, families, and societies, highlighting fragilities within and among nations. The response, an appropriate response, is going to involve reimagining and remaking the very structures of societies and the ways in which we collaborate for the common good. And coming out of this crisis is going to require a whole of society, whole of government, and whole of the world approach driven by compassion and by solidarity. So essentially, building back better, which should be our aspiration, not just restore the world we had before the pandemic, but building back better is an ambitious challenge. And it's a challenge in which educators have a very special role to play. So let me talk about the challenges that existed before this pandemic. I'm sharing with you results from the latest PISA study. If you look at these results, you will see for a number of countries that when 15-year-olds were asked, are you satisfied with your life? Well, most students were. A significant percentage of them were not. And I think the question that we should be asking ourselves, educators, how come in the time in history when we have the greatest resources, the most educated humanity, so many people are unhappy with their lives? Look at the red bar for Turkey. Only 44% of 15-year-olds were satisfied with your life. Why? In the same survey, people were asked, to what extent are you bullied in school? And you see in the two red bars that percentage for the United States and for Turkey as well. In both of these countries, around 25%, 1 in 4 of the students experience bullying in school. Same survey, these young people were asked, to what extent does your life have a clear meaning, a clear purpose? And while the good news is that, for example, in Turkey, 80% of the students think that they have life, 20% do not. Why? How come 1 in 5 Turkish young person, and in the US, 30%, doesn't feel that their life has meaning? I submit that this has a lot to do with how we teach and with the fact that the education we're offering our students is actually not empowering them. It's not providing the agency that they need to see themselves as architects of their own lives, as capable of collaborating with others in solving problems that matter. So for example, in the TALI survey, which is another survey conducted by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, just the last one, what we see is that most teachers are actually very good at doing things that are traditionally understood to be helpful, teacher-centered activities, but not so good in creating activities that are student-centered, that help students tackle complex challenges, that help students collaborate with others. So for example, most teachers summarize recently learned content, obviously a very good thing. In Turkey, 85%, you see that the little red bar on the top on the left-hand side of this chart. Most teachers in Turkey set goals at the beginning of instruction, a very good thing, right? Over 90%. Most teachers explain to the students what they expect that they should learn. That's phenomenal. Most teachers explain how old topics and new topics are related. This is all great news. We should be happy. But when we look at more complicated, more challenging pedagogies, the kinds of pedagogies that produce deeper learning, that produce the breadth of skills that are essential for the 21st century, the news are not so good. When teachers are asked, do you give your students tasks for which there is no obvious solution? Only 20% of the teachers in Turkey and only 30% of the teachers in the United States present students with such tasks. Now think about the current moment. Think about the pandemic. The pandemic is the quintessential adaptive education challenge. It's a perfect example. It's a paradigmatic example of the kind of challenge that a world that is volatile, uncertain, and in flux is going to give to us time and again. And it is the kind of challenge that schools should be preparing students for. And yet, when we don't give students tasks for which there is no obvious solution, we're not really giving them the opportunity to learn to solve new problems. It is as if in our desire to take care of our students, to make sure they don't experience failure, we put them in a bubble and we protect them so much, we scaffold their learning so much that we actually debilitate them. We actually have an unintended toxic effect in making them unprepared to solve the problems of the real world. Similarly, when teachers are asked, to what extent do you give your students tasks that require that they think critically? Look at Turkey. Only 50% of the teachers, 55% of the teachers say that they engage their students in critical thinking. How do you have the skills to challenge, to address the challenges caused by this pandemic if you have never been taught to think critically? Similarly, when teachers were asked in this survey, to what extent do you provide your students opportunities to work in small groups to solve a problem? Look again at Turkey. Only 40% of the teachers engage their students in small groups. And think about what all of you are having to do right now as a way to solve these difficult adaptive challenges of how to teach in a pandemic. You have to collaborate. You need great collaboration. And yet, the very skills that are indispensable to solve problems are not skills that we're exercising in the kinds of pedagogies that we use in schools. Similarly, when teachers were asked, to what extent do you let the students decide on their own how to solve a problem? Only 55% of the teachers in Turkey do that. It's even less in the US. It's 48% in the US. So that means half of the teachers don't use these pedagogies. Similarly, when teachers were asked, to what extent do you provide your students problems that require working with the problem at least a week? Only 30% of the teachers in Turkey do that. So when I talk about the opportunity of global education, global citizenship education, I really think of it as an opportunity to help us re-examine what kind of pedagogies should we use, what kinds of learning experiences should we give our students that help them build the skills they need to solve big problems. And that is what I'm going to present. To me, one of the things that should drive, one of the goals that should drive education are the Sustainable Development Goals adopted at the General Assembly of the United Nations 5 years ago. A very ambitious set of goals of what does it mean to build a world without poverty, without hunger, where there is good health for everyone, with quality education for all, with gender equality. Obviously, these are ambitious challenges. But if you take those challenges as the North Star, as the driver from which you then ask, what should a student know and be able to do and care about so that they actually have the skills to build a world without poverty, which is different from saying that they should be able to know these goals and they should be able to name them, to recite them. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is translating these goals into a framework of student learning outcomes that we can then use to orient the design of the curriculum. And that's what I have done with a series of resources. If you look at specifically Sustainable Development Goal number 4, target 4.7, look at the ambitious vision that is driving that goal, right? Educating students through education for sustainable development, for human rights, for gender equality, to promote a culture of peace and nonviolence, for global citizenship, to appreciate cultural diversity and the contribution of culture to sustainable development. Now, in many ways, these goals reflect the very Article 26 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where the right of education, look at Section 2, articulates what does it mean to educate all, to develop the full range of the human personality, and to strengthen respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, to promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. How very important these goals are at this moment, at this very difficult moment for humanity. So the 3 curriculum resources which I have developed give all a pathway, a map, a roadmap of how to do that. And I'm going to talk briefly about 2 of these books. I have placed on the chat room a link to a place where you can freely download these curricula. So let me talk about the World Course. The World Course is very simple, a curriculum that I developed with my teams that began with a very clear articulation of the learning outcomes that we had in mind. It's all project-based. It all uses the kinds of pedagogies that the latest Tally survey revealed only a minority of the teachers were using, but which are essential to develop the breadth of skills that are necessary to participate in the 21st century, that are essential for deeper learning. The emphasis is on student-centered active learning, teaching students to learn from their mistakes and from their successes, developing not only knowledge, but also skills and attitudes. This is a curriculum developed around engaging students for the entire year in a project, in a sustained project that leads into a capstone. Remember how that survey revealed that only 30% of the teachers in Turkey are engaging their students in projects that require more than a week? So this curriculum is about engaging students in projects that require a year to complete. The themes every year are coherent, the units are interdisciplinary, there is a lot of new knowledge and content. The goal of this curriculum is to foster agency, the ability and the desire to make a difference, initiative, leadership. The idea is to develop a growth mindset, a mindset of possibilities on the part of students, learning from what works, developing their innovative, their entrepreneurial spirit, developing strong connections with parents and communities as resources, emphasizing many of these skills that like curiosity, exploration, observation, analysis, research. The emphasis, the North Star, are the Sustainable Development Goals and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, making tons of connections, as Mr. Aydin was saying, right? Global citizenship does not negate national citizenship. In fact, it's about helping you understand the connections between your membership in all the communities of which you're a part, which include your local community, your province, your country, and the world, right? It engages students with complex and challenging problems, such as the problem of how do we continue to operate under a pandemic. The curriculum is age appropriate, but it's not infantilizing. It takes students from what is personal and immediate to more advanced and conceptual understandings. And so the way it does that is by having great clarity on what are some of these competencies that students are going to need to be able to advance the sustainable development goals, right? Intercultural competency, knowledge and skills, and work and mind habits. And for each one of them, it develops with great clarity. It names the specific domains, the specific capacities. The students should be able to recognize and weigh diverse cultural perspectives, understand their own identity as well as the identities of others, has the ability to work productively and to lead effectively in intercultural teams, and so on. And we do the same for each one of them. We end up with a framework of about 200 specific learning outcomes, which we then use to guide the development of the 350 units that are contained in this curriculum. So that curriculum is available. It's not an easy curriculum to teach. It's a curriculum that only the schools that have highly qualified teachers and that make a real commitment to build the capacity to teach that have been able to teach. Having said that, 20,000 people have downloaded this book, and this curriculum is being taught in a number of schools. But I realized it was essentially what this curriculum does is it goes from goals like the Sustainable Development Goals to defining the characteristics of a globally competent graduate, and then from there developing specific units that can then translate into specific lesson plans. But I developed with my team a simpler version of the curriculum, and this one is actually available in Turkish, and I believe you can find it in Turkey. You can also find it in English, and I have placed on the chat room a link where you can download this. And this has the same principles, the same spirit, but instead of having 350 complex units, it has 5 simple lessons per grade. But the other thing that this curriculum, this book contains is a protocol that explains how do you design a curriculum beginning with the Sustainable Development Goals, and even more importantly, how do you design a school-wide strategy for global education? And my view is that at this moment where we all have to decide how to teach in a context of a pandemic is a very opportune moment in which to use this framework as a way to help prioritize the curriculum. And what this process, this protocol to develop a school strategy for global education contains are 13 very simple steps, right? Establish a team that is in charge, have them study the SDGs, develop this framework of knowledge, skills, and dispositions, review what you were doing and decide where are you going to build the next step, develop a prototype for that next step, communicate that vision, develop an implementation plan, figure out what resources are you going to need to teach that, develop a dashboard to help you monitor the implementation of that, have a communication strategy, figure out how you're going to support your teachers so they build the capacities to teach that, basically execute, evaluate, and then do it better the next year, and then better the next year after that. And so what this is doing basically is providing a framework, providing some tools that can help make visible and explicit the kind of knowledge that most teachers develop when they practice, which is basically testing the hypothesis, if I teach A, my students will learn B, and if my students learn B, C will happen in the world. But when you make this visible, you now make it possible for schools to collaborate, to build a network of schools where people are using the same language, the same methods. And as a result of that, everybody can learn from what everyone else is doing. And that's why I think this Ankara education platform has such potential, because it can be an environment that makes it possible to sustain an improvement network that professionalizes the knowledge that you're all developing as you advance your own experiments in global education. That's why I'm so excited that Mr. Aydin is going to translate this book, of which I'm going to say just a few words in Turkey, because I think this can give you a language, this can give you a common language, a common framework that you can use. So the novelty in this book, which was just published 3 months ago. It was published in April of this year, a month after the pandemic had been announced. And to my surprise, the book has been downloaded already 128,000 times, which I read as an indicator that even in this very difficult time for humanity, very difficult time for all of us, for our students, for their parents, for the teachers, people are taking the time to think deeply about the meaning of what we do, about how do we make sure that we do things that actually have a clear purpose. So perhaps this is really an opportunity to build a renaissance in education. Paradoxically, this very difficult time is a time for us to be really thoughtful and intentional in educating in a way that is aligned with big and deep and valuable purposes. And I'm hoping that this book will help you do that. So what the book does is to offer 5 perspectives to think about the process of educational transformation: a cultural perspective, a psychological perspective, a professional perspective, an institutional, and a political perspective. And I think of each of these perspectives as a kaleidoscope. Each one of them illuminates certain aspects of the process of educational change, but together they provide a very capacious, a very comprehensive, a very robust way to think about change, which I think can help a process of communication. See, when most people think about global education, this is a simple representation of an educational system, right? So at the core is the experience of the students, and the experience of the students is most immediately shaped and supported by what their teacher does. But that what the teacher does is in turn embedded in what the department that this particular teacher belongs to, whether it's the math department, the chemistry department, the history department. That in itself is embedded by what the institution does, the goals of the school, the norms of the school. When the institution is a member of a network, in the case of a private school, that itself is embedded in what the network does, or in the case of a public school, what the institution does is embedded in what the ministry does, national curriculum, and so on. And when many people think about innovation, say innovation for global education, they restrict that innovation to what happens in the classroom to the student, which is fine. It is the most immediate experience for the student. But in many ways, if we try to produce change only at that level without addressing the other layers, this is like putting a little post-it on the refrigerator door to remind us of something. It is helpful, it's valuable, but it may not stick for very long because it really hasn't changed the fundamental processes and structures of the school. What this book argues is that we need to extend the zone of global education to cover the entire institution. And to do that, we do need a vocabulary, we do need a language that can help the different stakeholders communicate and develop shared vision about what that means. And what I think these 5 perspectives do is they provide us a language to do that, to produce system level change. So what is the cultural perspective? A cultural perspective is about understanding that what schools do is really embedded in a set of social expectations, norms, and values that define what are the accepted roles for schools. Now, this pandemic has expanded that zone because I think as a result of the time that students have spent at home, I think many parents have a much deeper understanding and appreciation and informed point of view on the work that teachers and schools do. And at the same time, teachers have a much greater understanding of who their students are and who their parents are and what their living conditions are. And this is a good thing. I think it can create a much stronger alignment between these two worlds. A psychological perspective is basically about depending on the knowledge that has been generated by the science of learning and teaching to inform how do we design experiences that are truly transformational for our students, right? So we know a lot about how it is that you can develop resiliency on students. How can you help them develop a mindset of possibilities, a growth mindset? And it's possible to structure experiences in schools that cultivate, that are built on those principles, on those psychological principles. At the same time, we also know a lot about the impact that anxiety has on students and how debilitating a period of sustained stress and anxiety can be. And it's very important to depend on that scientific knowledge, especially at this moment when students are experiencing, just like adults, the anxiety caused by the current moment, by the fact that we don't know we're going to have a vaccine. We don't know whether we're going to be directly infected by COVID-19 and what impact this is going to have in our lives. So it's very important to inform our design of curriculum, of pedagogy on good science, on good thinking. And I think a phenomenal resource is a synthesis produced by the National Research Council in the US, synthesizing everything that we know about how students learn. A professional perspective basically is about understanding that an educational system is like a puzzle, a series of interlocking pieces. And if we want to produce lasting change, we have to make sure that there is good coherence, there is good alignment between all these pieces. It's not very helpful to simply develop a new set of lessons, a new curriculum on global citizenship, if we don't provide students the opportunity to gain the capacities they're going to need to develop those competencies, or if we don't change the assessment system. So there has to be coherence, there has to be alignment between the various components of that system. Similarly, I just described the institutional perspective. A professional perspective is about building the expert knowledge on teachers so that they are capable of executing, they are capable of delivering these pedagogies that are aligned to higher perspectives. An institutional perspective is about understanding the system as a series of interlocking pieces. And lastly, a political perspective is about understanding that everybody, the education system really convenes and requires the collaboration of many different stakeholders, parents and teachers and governments and the private sector and civil society. And each one of them may have their own perspective on, what is the right thing to do for the students? What does it mean to be a good society? And it's important to take the time to listen. It's important to take the time to understand those perspectives, because only when we understand what are the deep values that inform the passion that people bring to the enterprise, is it possible to really build the necessary consensus to have lasting change. And so what I'm offering this morning is a pathway which I hope will support hope. I'm suggesting that it is absolutely possible for teachers to step up and play a significantly important leadership role in the current moment, in this very difficult moment, by aligning the work they do in schools with ambitious goals, with a vision of a world that is more inclusive, where everyone belongs, that is more sustainable. And that doing this requires not extraordinary things. It requires us simply for us to think carefully about how it is that what we teach is aligned with a vision, such as the vision articulated in the Sustainable Development Goals. In the resources that I have presented this morning that I'm offering to you, I hope you will find a tool to make it possible for us to teach our students to understand very deeply what Terence, a playwright in the Roman Republic 20 centuries ago, expressed when he said that to be human is to understand that nothing human is foreign to us, which is a way to say that to be human is to be capable of tremendous compassion for everything that affects every other human. And I think that the current moment, the current crisis that we live, requires exactly that kind of compassion and exactly that solidarity. And I think that every teacher, each and every one of us, is uniquely placed to build that compassion, to build that solidarity, and to help our students develop the hope that a better world is possible as they develop their skills to learn to collaborate with others and to become architects of their own lives, and to join others in taking responsibility to improve the communities of which they are a part. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today.
Thank you, Professor Riemers, for this great opportunity and for this fruitful presentation which has many evidences, and we provided in-depth knowledge about the topic. Thank you very much for this again. And right now, we have many challenging questions for the Q&A session. I'd like to ask them one by one if there is no time limitation. And may I ask both of our speakers that how much time for Q&A session?
I have all the time you need, yeah.
And Mr. Boyacı, do you have a time limitation? Okay. And I'd like to direct all the questions to you as far as I can. The first question is about the slides. Fernando, can we share them with the audience?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll send them to you. Yes, no problem. But you also are recording this, so everybody has a copy of the recording, and I'm delighted that you're also recording it on Facebook Live. So maybe the people who are helping us with the technology can put on the chat room the link where everyone will be able to see and share with others. Because I do think that as teams in schools are getting together to think about how are we going to teach, just giving everybody the opportunity to have some shared access to the same knowledge might be a good way to begin that conversation. So I think what you're doing today, Mirkan, in bringing us together is extremely valuable. And if you can provide a link to that recording, that might be a very useful thing.
Yeah, we are going to provide that link, and we are going to share the recorded version of the seminar on our social media accounts that we can reach as many as teachers we can. So there are many questions about distance teaching and e-learning. I'm going to direct them to Mr. Boyacı, but before them, there are some nice questions. Let me ask Fernando first. How much should we tolerate the technology in order not being transhumans? That we are too much imposed to technology right now. So that how far shall we tolerate the technology in our classes, Fernando?
Oh, I think that technology has been extremely helpful to help all of us continue to educate throughout the pandemic. I mean, imagine a world in which we didn't have technology. It would have been much harder to do this thing. Having said that, obviously, there are better uses and worse uses of technology. It's not very bearable for anyone to spend 8 hours a day sitting on Zoom talks. It's not very bearable for anyone to listen to a 3-hour Zoom talk. And so the kind of rapid transition that all of us, myself included, did back in March when we basically had to send everybody home was a quick adjustment. But I'll tell you, at Harvard, for example, where we have made the decision in my school and in others, that this entire academic year, we're going to be teaching online. And we have spent the summer, the faculty, learning best practices in online instruction. So, for example, I teach a course on education policy. In normal times, the way I teach my course is students meet with me for 3 hours. And during those 3 hours, we do a variety of things, right? We have a flexible space, so I do some lecturing, they work in small groups, I invite guests, and so on. And then my students have a time to discuss with my teaching fellows. Obviously, I had to completely redesign this for an online environment. And so what I have done is I have created a flipped classroom where I have produced for every class 4 very short videos, about 15 minutes each, explaining clear concepts. And then I'm going to meet with my students for 90 minutes in an activity like this one. And then they're going to meet for 90 minutes with the teaching fellows. And we are enhancing our work in Zoom with very interactive activities using Google Docs, for example. So what that says is that, first of all, I am delighted that we have technology. I think it's making it possible for us to sustain educational opportunity. Number 2, we have many technologies, which we should remember that a book is also a technology. A notebook is a technology. WhatsApp is a technology. Television is a technology. Radio is a technology. And it's very important that we ask, how do we reach all students? And I know that in most places around the world, it is not possible to reach all students if we only use, say, online education. Now, in some institutions, it's possible to do that. And when that is possible, that should be the preferred means. But there are many places where students don't have access to online, they don't have devices. So we need to think about a multimedia platform that can help us provide educational opportunity to all students and not just to some of them. And then lastly, what I would say is it is very important to create opportunities for teachers to learn how to use technology effectively. So I wouldn't put the question as to how much we should tolerate technology. I think technology is a good thing, but there is a way to make technology a good use. So for example, if students are going to be at home, I don't know what you're going to be able to do in Turkey. I can tell you that in the United States, where in terms of infections, we are in a very difficult place. And there are some states where the situation is more or less contained, but in most of the states, this is not contained. It is not going to be possible to begin classes in a few weeks face-to-face. We're going to have to begin classes online. That means that students have to be learning at home. Well, there is a smart way to use technology in which you engage students with their parents in their normal activities, not force the parents to spend all the time next to the student, right? Talking to them about the class. But the parents have to do things as part of their lives. At some point, the family has to have dinner, has to have lunch. They're going to have conversations. You can create good curriculum that builds on those natural interactions that students are having with their parents, and that produces a seamless integration between the life of the student in their home and what is expected of the school. I don't know if this answers the question.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. And there is another nice question. I'd like to direct it to both of you. What is the best lesson or advice that you have learned or provided during your education time? And I'd like to link this question with another. What are the most important challenges which inhibit teacher change, and how can we best enable it?
I would ask Dr. Boyashi to begin.
In 2017, the World Bank has pressed the policy paper. Its name is Crises in Learning, and different actually quotations in the policy paper. It's a book actually, and one of the critical one actually that is shared by all of the countries and the teachers and students is that whatever you change in terms of curriculum, in terms of technology, in terms of actually the school buildings and school settings and etc., you will face at the end the teachers and teacher competency. Because for example, from the Turkey, we have been continuously making educational reforms strongly at the beginning of 2000. And we have almost completed the school building capacity. We settled internet structure, infrastructure in all of schools actually. It's not efficient, but it's okay. And most of the teachers in Turkey, lack of teachers is tremendous at the end of 1990s. And now we have almost 300,000 teachers are waiting to be employed, and etc. And we changed actually the curriculum for construction period. But at the end, all of the reforms that we have done so far do not lead to increased international success, international exams success in Turkey. And we have still some challenge. And when we ask why, of course, we can produce different solutions. But the critical core is that whenever and whatever you do for improving in education, in terms of curriculum, in terms of coursebooks and textbooks, in terms of the technology, if the teachers at the door of the classroom do not believe and do not understand and actually do not commit yourself, and then this cannot actually transcend the classroom and actually the minds. Teaching as a profession is not actually just a profession, human life, lifestyle actually. And it's so much focusing on actually the humanity and being human. And it's so teachers are not the teachers, teachers are the classroom leaders with that leads the life change of the children. And it's so for us, one of the critical component, our priority is to foster, empower every kind of skills besides every kind of needs of the teachers to improve the education. Because when you say something good in the bureaucracy, which means nothing in classroom settings, because teachers just face the students, teachers are just faced with the school principals, faced with the parents. So they have to actually manage every kind of interaction, the relation, every processes. So if you don't actually accelerate, if you don't actually then make much more easy or foster them, then and education as a whole cannot be reformed. And it's so because of this, we have tried to transform the professional learning development for teachers. And in Dr. Myers talked about the cultural, institutional, psychological, and professional development for the reformed education. We started with the professional approach, and then institutional approach, and then culture could be reproduce itself in school setting. We believe this one, and it's so technology. From the question at first, technology is just a way, and there's a close distinction with the instruction and education. Actually, the online education, we believe, and we see and we experience that underlie the instruction, not an education. As the Manuel Castells, one of the critical sociologists in the world, talk about the network society. This is a new way of the networking of the people, but it's not a way to transform every kind of the feeling, actually the leadership or the motivation on the online. But it's a complementary part of the education and the instruction in classroom settings, we believe. Thank you.
Thank you.
I completely, maybe we can proceed so we take other questions. I don't have much to add to that, but the one thing that I would mention on the topic of innovation is the following. For the last 5 months, I have been doing a lot of research looking at what impact the pandemic is having on education systems. And I've been doing this in collaboration with the OECD, with Andrea Schleicher, and with colleagues at the World Bank and another organization. And I have to tell you that when I compare, we conducted a survey back almost 4.5 months ago, where we surveyed people in 100 countries asking what impact, what plans do you have to continue to educate during the pandemic? And to be very honest, I can say this now, after I analyzed the results of that survey, I was very concerned because 4 months ago, no one had any clear plans and everybody was anticipating that we were going to essentially lose a lot of educational gains made in the last decades over the next year or two. We conducted another survey about 1.5 months ago in which we asked, what have you done? And what have you learned? And we analyzed that. And the comparison between the two, it's like night and day. To my surprise, the great story of this pandemic is how much innovation has taken place at all levels. A lot of it generated by teachers, by principals, by governments, by organizations of civil society, public, private. It's a great story of the existence of an innovation ecosystem in many places that has made it possible to accomplish extraordinary things in a very short period of time. Are they perfect? Are they working without problems? Of course not. Of course not. But if you put in historical perspective what has been done, right? I'll give you an example. The city of Bogota, the municipality of Bogota, When the government announced they were going to close down the schools, the Secretary of Education convened a meeting on Zoom with all the teachers, all the principals, and she said, I need your help. Let's think together about what we can do so we can continue to educate, because I think we're going to have a major education crisis. And she listened, and she was able, based on that deep listening, to create initially it was just a website in which they basically took the curriculum and resources aligned with the curriculum, and they put a lot of digital materials for the students to learn on their own and for the parents to help them. But they also evaluated. So within 2 weeks, they realized this was only reaching 20% of the kids. So then they developed a partnership with television, with radio. Well, the important message of that story, and then eventually what they did was so successful that the National Ministry of Education of Colombia adopted it as their national strategy for educational continuity. Now, what I want to highlight here is not necessarily that they had the right design from the beginning. They didn't. But the humility of this leader to recognize that she needed help, that she couldn't solve this problem alone. And the fact that she invited collaboration from others, from teachers, from parents, from principals, from the private sector, is what made it possible for them to build a prototype and to continue to improve. And I have seen very similar things in other places. I'll give you just another example. In Chile, when the government decided they were going to shut down the school, Chile has an organization which exists in 55 countries, like Teach for America. I don't know if you have one in Turkey, but it's an organization that takes recent college graduates and gives them some training and places them in schools that have a lot of poor children, and they teach there for 2 years. And these people are all connected. All these fellows are all connected with their fellow volunteers around the world. So when the government decided they were going to shut down the schools, 2 of these volunteers said, what's going to happen to our kids? To Mr. Boyashi's point, right? They understood that this was not just a job. This was a mission. This was a mission. They were responsible for their students. And so they had read in a newsletter that the people in Teach for Nigeria had used their mobile phones to record math lessons and language lessons. And then they had used WhatsApp to deliver the lessons. So these 2 young Chilean teachers thought, we can do this too. So they recorded these lessons, and they were so humorous, they were so funny, that within a week, everyone in that community, which was a very poor community, was listening to the lessons. Not only the students, but the parents and the people in other schools. So the mayor in that municipality noticed that, and he told the other mayors in the country, and especially the mayors in very poor municipalities that had no internet. They said, okay, we want to broadcast these lessons. So they built a partnership with radio stations. Within 3 weeks, 250 radio stations in Chile were broadcasting these lessons. And then this organization put together not just these 2 teachers, 50 teachers to produce that. Now think about this story. What does this story tell you? That good ideas can come from anywhere. No one has the monopoly of good ideas. That a 25-year-old person can solve a problem which a government had not been able to solve at that point. That a good leader, a mayor, has the humility to identify good ideas wherever they come from and to support them, to project them, and to make it possible to share this knowledge, that this sharing, this collaboration, this making connections is the way, is the process that can help us in a very short time to solve a very difficult challenge. So I think that this pandemic has shown us that there is tremendous innovation potential. And I think the real leadership challenge for school leaders, for leaders of systems, for government leaders, is to lead in a way that is humble, that is inviting, that encourages collaboration, that communicates that nobody has the monopoly of the solutions here, that we need everybody, that this is a time in which everybody has to come forward and everybody is welcome. And if we break down the barriers, the silos within our schools, among our schools, between schools and society, we are going to stimulate that innovation. And I think that's what we need. I think that one of the great opportunities of this moment is that technology has made it possible for us to have these conversations. Teachers have been in communications with peers from all over the world over the last few weeks, and only good things can come of that. You know, I am inspired by what happened in another pandemic 6 centuries ago, 1348, when the bubonic plague arrived in Italy, and in a matter of 2 years, took the lives of 1/3 of the population of Italy. Terrible, devastating, right? But at that time, I mean, you can imagine health infrastructure was not what it is today. You can imagine the fear that people had of living with the plague, of how this destroyed societies and institutions. But there was a family in Florence that did something very unusual. I'm sure that many people thought they were crazy. This family were the Medicis. At a time when people are worried about surviving, when society has been dislocated, Lorenzo de' Medici in particular, but also his father, decided to invest in the arts and in the early science. Science, as we know it, had not even been discovered in the 14th century. And so he funded painters, like great artists like Donatello, like Raphael, like Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo, as you know, was also a scientist. He funded social scientists like Machiavelli. And if you know Florence, it's a very tiny city. It's a very small place. And in bringing together, in attracting and supporting all these creators from different places, he produced what some people have characterized as the Medici effect. And the idea of the Medici effect is that if you concentrate, if you bring into communication people who think differently, that is what stimulates creativity and innovation. There is not a lot of creativity when you only talk to people who think like you. Creativity happens when you come into contact with people who have different ideas, who challenge your ideas, who make you question how you see the world. And that's the beauty of diversity, right? That's the beauty of a place like Harvard University, a global university that brings people from all over the world, from different domains of knowledge. We are constantly stimulated by our students, by our colleagues, and it is that stimulation that produces that Medici effect that produces creativity. Well, I think that in this moment, we have an opportunity to produce a Medici effect in every school, in every locality, in every country, as we use modern technology to make it possible for people to be in communication with others who think differently, just like those two young teachers in Chile were stimulated by their peers in Nigeria. And they basically thought about what these people in Nigeria were doing, and they said, well, we could be doing the same thing here. And then they, in turn, stimulated that mayor who basically, in sharing that idea with 260 mayors, helped them think, I could be doing this here too. So I think this is our opportunity. Our opportunity here is this is a moment where we need everyone. We need every mind. We cannot afford to spare any idea. And I think the leadership challenge is to create a context where everyone feels included, welcome, and that they can be part of the solution.
Thank you, Fernando. By the way, could you recall the best advice or the best lesson that you achieved when you were a student, Fernando?
The best advice from the best lesson that what?
When you were a student?
Oh, I was very lucky. I had very good teachers, so I had very many good lessons. But if I reflect on what I learned the most, were opportunities when my teachers gave me a chance to do my own thing. So I'm going to give you one example. When I was only in the 5th grade, my mother, who was a secretary, was very involved with the school. And I was lucky that it was a very small school that actually listened to the parents. It was so tiny, it was like 280 students. Imagine it was such a little school that in every grade, in every classroom, there had 2 grades, first and second, third and fourth, and so on. And I think what was so special about that school is that it was such a small community that the teachers knew everybody, they knew our parents, and they really conveyed profound respect to us and belief in our ideas. So my mother suggested to the principal that he should buy some typewriters so that we would learn how to type. And the principal listened to my mother. He bought 10 typewriters, and my mother signed me up in a typing class. I can tell you that at that moment, I hated it. I was the only boy with 9 girls learning how to type. You can imagine what other boys in my school were telling me, right? About why are you learning how to type instead of playing soccer with us in the field? But that changed my life, and I'll tell you how it changed my life. That Christmas, my Christmas present was a typewriter. And so with a typewriter, I began to type. And one of the things I did is I typed a short essay, and I asked my teacher if she could put it in the bulletin board. The classroom had a small bulletin board. So this talks about the respect, right? My teacher basically honored that. She said, yes, she put my essay in the bulletin board so my classmates could read it. It was such a small school that the principal visited the schools, the classrooms, several times a day. So he came and he said, who wrote that? This little boy did it. So you can imagine what this does to a young boy, right? I'm only 11 years old and I have written one page and my teacher thinks it's important enough to put it. My classmates are reading it. The principal is reading it. So I wrote another one. The next week, the principal says, you like to write. Would you like to have a student to write a student newspaper? The school didn't have a student newspaper. So I said, yeah. So he took me to a room where we had a basic, simple photocopy machine. It was called a mimeograph. And in those days, this is before photocopiers had been invented, you basically had to type in a wax paper called a stencil. So I learned to produce a newspaper. Anyway, that changed my life. I can tell you that the school that I went to finished in the 9th grade. It didn't complete high school. No one in my neighborhood finished high school or went to university. My parents hadn't gone to university. But because I began to write and because my teachers respected me and the principal got to know me, one day my principal said, listen, the Ministry of Education is organizing a competition for someone to write a contest, an essay about Nicholas Copernicus. So right now, I'm in the 6th grade. I didn't know who Copernicus was, but I knew how to type, right? So I said, sure, I will do it. So I spent 6 months, talk about the power of long projects, right? I spent 6 months on a very challenging project. How could I learn about this man called Copernicus that I hadn't heard about in a very tiny school that was so modest that our library was only 2 bookshelves in the office of the principal. And I basically looked at an encyclopedia in the school, learned everything I could about Copernicus, and I wrote an essay. And I sent it to the ministry, and I won the first prize. Now you can imagine what this did for this tiny school. The principal was so proud, as if he had got the prize. And again, the principal had such respect for the students that he took all the students. They had a special ceremony where the Minister of Education was going to give the prize. And so my entire school came with me. 3 school buses, I think it was. All the students came, and I remember this moment when the minister shakes my hand and gives me a diploma. So anyway, the rest of that is history, but I can tell you that the reason I'm able to do what I do today is because I was very lucky that I had teachers who took the time to know who I was and who showed me great respect and who supported my initiatives. And that's why it's one of the reasons why I know that the most important thing that education can do is help a student develop a sense of who they are, develop a voice, develop their own dreams, their capacity to imagine, and the confidence that they can achieve those dreams. And the only way to learn those things is if you can do things, if you can do something that you can call your own. Because every baby step, you begin writing an essay, and then that becomes a newspaper, and that becomes winning a national competition, and then that begins a journal, and then that becomes a book, and so on.
Fernando, thank you very much for this real-life story. And as we are approaching to dinner time in Turkey, I observe that we are losing our listeners one by one. So I would like to ask the final questions to our speakers. Mr. Boyacı, I think you were addressed to this question many times. In an exam-focused education system, how can teachers teach how to deal with challenging tasks which are not asked in the exam content? This question is for you. And I have a question for Fernando. Right now, we have many English teachers within our audience. There are many questions about language teaching, but to sum up, I would like to ask you, what will be the future of language education, Fernando?
Why don't we begin with Dr. Boyasi?
Sure. Your mic is off, Mr. Boyaji.
Just a few minutes ago, we talked about the distinction between the instruction and education. The goal, ultimate goal, is to provide an education. Providing an education, actually providing a life skill to lead the children and every children in school settings. In Turkey, in a conflicting dilemma, one of them is central organized exams, and another one is the school settings and school scale. And it should be a life skill. And so, first of all, the goal, critical objective of those scales are completely different. One of them is to provide a way to lead, to provide a life scale to every kind of teachers in classroom settings in all over the Turkey. On the other hand, actually, the central organized exam is another objective, just selection. And the process paradigm, actually, the central organized exams are to categorize and to classify the children according to their actually, with the quotation, the competencies. And the life and the exam are completely different things. But on the other hand, we can talk about that if we are able to train and provide an education to children with a real life and getting a necessary skills for being successful in the multiple choice tasks will come later. I mean, this is just a skill. And I mean, being successful in a multiple choice test is not a life skill. It's just a skill. And a skill and could easily be get. And if the student and if the children, the child knows about everything, and if they experienced the content and fostered, empowered by the teacher, that's okay. If they learned learned the thing that's in curriculum, it's okay. And being successful in multiple choice or central organized exams is another issue. And actually, this is not actually the critical value or the reference point to be successful teachers in the teacher. And just think about the teachers in all your student times. Who is your actually the champions? Who is your the heroes? Are the teachers that push you to prepare the multiple choice tests, or were the teachers that leads you, that communicates, affects you, just take care of you? And so in Turkey we have 1 million teachers, and we have really good teachers, really good and competent teachers. If it is not so, we assume. Now we are talking about we are in the Economic Development Index. We're in the first 20, and this country was founded in 1920. And within the 80 years in the past, we from the 0 to first 20, we came into the list with the parliament, with the democracy and the republic as a developing country. And so who will provide this one? And one of the philosophers takes innovation, and the claim of civilization is not the business of politicians. It's not the business of actually the bureaucracy. Is the actually the just responsibility of intellectuals, what I mean, teachers and academicians and every kind of intellectuals. And if Turkey has managed to place oneself in the first 20 countries in terms of economically and socially and culturally development index within approximately 200 countries, we have been successful. We have been successful. We have been successful in throughout the educational history in the past. And so if we manage them, and just remember what we have done so far, and in what conditions we have done, in what conditions we have been successful. And then now if we did it, if we have done with the teachers, with the school settings, and then we do it again. And it's so, I believe that every kind of teacher, every teacher of this country could find the best way. It's not actually receipt for training a teacher. It's not just engineering process. It's actually a leadership process. I'm sure that every teacher can find the best way to support their own children, own classroom settings, and our responsibility, and just empower them and to meet the demands of them for every kind of professional growth, for my DG. And so we will try. We believe actually the teachers, and when we start this way in 2019, we declared every person in society, every kind of reform requires the alliances. And our alliances are the teachers and school principals in Turkey. Without their support, without their belief, any kind of reform cannot be reached and cannot be successful. So I believe that the teachers in this country, our teachers, will find a way to the lead and being a leader in classroom settings. Thank you.
I'm very inspired by this vision that Dr. Boyashi presents of teachers as nation builders. It's exactly how teachers see themselves in a country like Singapore, for example. And I have just placed a link to a publication that you can download freely called 15 Letters on Education in Singapore. If you're curious about how exactly what you're describing is how teachers see themselves in a country that was a very poor country 5 decades ago and became to be one of the highest per capita income and educationally very accomplished countries in the world because of the leadership that their teachers played. I have also placed online a link to a book I published a few years ago in which I talk about my teachers. So you had asked me about and the name of that book is One Student at a Time, Leading the Global Education Movement. You can find that link online. But I wanted to talk about foreign language because I am convinced, I think it was Goethe, the wonderful writer of the Enlightenment, who said, the person who speaks only one language sees the world with one eye. A second language gives you a perspective, a depth, a capacity for empathy, a fluidity of the mind. There is actually good research that shows that if you speak two languages, your thinking becomes more complex. And so I think learning multiple foreign languages is a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful gift for people. And I'm delighted that many of you, because as you know, when you teach language, you don't just teach the language. You help people understand a history, a culture. You help people, you essentially teach someone to put themselves in the shoes of a person from a different part of the world, from a different cultural context. And I think it is, to me, that is what Terence meant when he said, to be human is to live so that nothing human is foreign to us. And I don't have much to offer in terms of foreign language instruction because it is not my expertise, other than say that I love learning foreign languages. I speak 5 different languages myself, and learning a foreign language actually makes me happy in the way that other people get their happiness from other activities. But I do have a resource that may be of interest to you if you allow me to conclude in this somewhat lighter note. over the last 2 years, I have been writing a series of children's books. And I will tell you what my goal is with these books are, by the way, published in many different languages. My goal with these books is very simple, is to encourage conversations between generations, between grandparents and grandchildren. And the reason I did this is not because I have grandchildren yet. I have two sons, but they're too young to have children. But because I have the sense that sometimes the rapid pace in which we live makes it difficult for the young to develop historical perspective, to develop an appreciation of where they came from and where things came from. And I think that in every family, if you make it possible for children to talk to their grandparents, they will develop that sense of roots, that sense of where they come from. And so what I did with these books, which are basically, the story is not very important. The story is a story of a little bird. Um, and but the books have at the end a series of questions, which I am hoping that grandparents discuss with their children. So in fact, book number 1 is precisely about empathy, about what does it mean to see the life through the eyes of another. And book number 2 is about friendship and about the power of diverse friendships and what are the ethics of treating people who are different like you. And book number 3 is about solidarity, and it's about taking care of those who need your help. And book number 4 is about teachers and about the important work of teachers in making students feel like they belong, making all students feel like they belong. Now, I write these books as a hobby. I don't think I have any particular talent writing books, but obviously a lot of my ideas about global citizenship find their way through these books. And so the books are available in many languages, and various governments have adopted them. Most recently, the government of Costa Rica, where teaching English as a foreign language is an important goal, said these books are wonderful because they are available in Spanish and in English. We can use them to teach them. And I gave them a license at no cost so that they can use these books and they can develop curriculum to teach English using the books, because you have the same book in both languages. And I just placed on the link, one of the things that I did when this pandemic began is I placed illustrated narrations of these books freely on YouTube. And so that people would have something to do. I knew that kids were going to be spending so much time in their homes. I said, well, maybe they can listen to these books. And for some reason that I don't understand, the narrations in Spanish have been downloaded 80,000 times, but not in English. So one of my questions is the book different in Spanish than it is in English or in French or in German or in Italian or in Arabic, which is it also is. And I'm not an expert in language, but I do know, I know that there is an organization in the United States that has used the books to develop curriculum to teach Spanish as a foreign language. So I have placed the link to that curriculum. So if any of you had an interest in using these books, you have my blessing. Dr. Boyagi, if you wanted the ministry to do the same thing, that unfortunately they're not available in Turkish, so I cannot offer you that. But if you want to translate them, you have my permission. I guess what I'm saying with the books is the same thing that I said about writing my first student newspaper. It's very important in a situation that is complicated, like the one we're living in, not to sit for too long contemplating the complexity, but to do something, whatever it is, that is within your reach. And, it may not achieve the goals that you hope, but the feedback from what you did will guide you, will tell you what is the next thing. I can tell you that when I wrote these books, I was not thinking that ministries of education were going to be using them. I was writing these for my own amusement and basically to give them to my friends. But right now, I can tell you that the ministries of Colombia, of Ecuador, of Mexico, of Costa Rica have adopted these books. The Ministry of Education of Abu Dhabi is translating the books in Arabic, and they want to use them. So obviously, people find their own way to take your work and to use it for their purposes. And I think that's the way in which each one of us can exercise leadership. So we can continue this conversation about the books, Dr. Boyagi and Mirkan, if you're interested after this call. I hope this was somewhat helpful. But they're available in English, so you can use them in English to teach English.
Sure, we will, Professor Riemers. There are dozens of questions which I could not ask due to time limitation. I hope that we would have another opportunity to meet again soon with these great speakers. I'm sure that all the participants were inspired from this great seminar. And I'm proud to announce that Professor Riemers' book, Educating Students to Improve the World, will be delivered to you in Turkish in a couple of days. And the book will be open to pre-access on teacher platforms. Professor Riemers, Dr. Boyacı, thank you for setting aside this great time in your busy schedules. Thank you very much for this great seminar. And on behalf of Ankara Education Platform, I would like to thank all the participants and I wish you all a good evening after this great seminar. And may I request your final words, Mr. Boyacı, Mr. Riemers?
Mr. Boyacı, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the participants, and we really appreciated such kind of effort of the Ankara platform. And Dr. Myers, we really thank you for your inspiring seminar. And for all of my colleagues, we will open a new ways to improve yourself, and online or the face-to-face. But Turkish Minister of National Education could like a huge and a long train. When we try to direct their own, when we change its direction, I mean, in Turkey, done, and it takes time. And the dissemination will take time, but we are over there just to foster and empower all of your skills. We will open different seminars and with international accreditations at the accredited certification, and we can make a promise that now for all of the ELT teachers, we open a new, actually, the international program with the British Council and United Kingdom, and with the e-twinning partners. And at the end of this September, we put in a practice, and we will support every kind of ELT teachers with a very inspiring projects. And so, thank you all of our teachers, and good luck for the new term. We trust you. Actually, everybody is trusting you, and with the pandemic period, your real value in the life of the children will actually has been understood by not only by the school principal, but also by every mother, every father, and every grandmother, because they just came along with their own children, and they experienced to train a children, and it's very inspiring experience for all of them. So I think the society will rediscover the meaning of teaching profession, and so we really appreciate. I as a personality, I as a DG for teacher training, and as a colleague, appreciate all of your efforts in school settings for our children. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you. It is I who thank you, Mirkan, for the initiative of organizing this and for the invitation and for your good leadership in understanding that this moment requires solidarity and generosity in providing people the opportunity to know that they're not alone. And I thank you, Mr. Boyacı. I have been very, very pleased to hear how much you and your ministry are doing to support teachers, and how deeply you understand that how critical teachers are to the future of your society, and how essential it is to provide them the support to build the capacities they will need to really be leaders in building a better world. And I thank each and every one of you who took time on a Saturday night for you to come together and to think in what I know is a very difficult time for all of us, for each and every one of us. This pandemic has caused very significant suffering and will cause even more suffering, I am certain, not only in the lives that it will take and in the lives of those who will be directly impacted by the people that they lose to this pandemic, but in the many indirect effects, right? The poverty that this pandemic will create, the inequality that it will augment, the many disruptions it will create to society. So this is a long night that we're living in, and we don't know exactly when the long night will end. But in a long night, I think the best thing we can do is to be with others, and to be with others where everyone brings what they can, brings a small candle. And I think that's what conversations like this one that we've had today can do. Remind us that we are not alone in this long night, that we each can do what is within our reach to illuminate the way, and that together we will find a path so that at the end of this long night, the sun rises again. And hopefully it rises to a world that is more inclusive, where every person truly belongs, and where we relate to the earth in a way that is sustainable. And there is no question in my mind that in the work that each one of you does with your students, you are building that renaissance. I have long known that schools are not just places that reproduce the existing structures and customs in a society, but they are places of anticipation of a better world, that we can, in our schools, in our classrooms, teach our students not only the world as it is, but the world that could be, a world that is better. So I thank you for that work, and I thank you for the privilege of having spent some time with you today. Thank you. I wish you all good health.
Thank you, Fernando. This was a great conclusion for this great seminar. I wish to come together again with another challenging subject in a short time. Thank you for your teachers for setting their times aside for this great event. I wish you all a good evening and wish to see you soon. Thank you very much. And I'm closing the session with your permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.